The limousine was supposed to keep moving. Whitney Houston's security team had one rule: never stop on New York streets. But on that October morning in 1994, something made the driver hit the brakes. A voice, a broken, haunting voice singing, "Greatest love of all." Nobody could have predicted what would happen next. This street encounter would create a bond lasting until Whitney's final breath. It was 9:47 a.m., October 12th, 1994. Whitney was in Manhattan for Waiting to Exhale rehearsals. "I Will Always Love You" had dominated charts for 14 weeks. She was the voice, untouchable. But that morning, sitting in the back of that limousine on West 42nd Street, Whitney looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from being perfect for too long. "Stop the car," Whitney said quietly. "Miss Houston, we're running late." "I said stop the car." The driver pulled over near a subway entrance. That's where they saw her. Sarah Mitchell was 52 but looked 70. Filthy layered clothes, matted hair, a cardboard sign, "Hungry, God bless." But she was singing. "I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadow." Her voice was cracked, damaged by years on the streets. But something underneath made Whitney's eyes widen. "If I fail, if I succeed, at least I lived as I believe." "Miss Houston, we really need to go," Maria insisted. "This isn't safe." Whitney wasn't listening. She watched this homeless woman sing like her life depended on it. Sarah's eyes were closed, lost in the music, swaying slightly. Then she opened her eyes and saw Whitney Houston's face. Sarah stopped mid-verse, mouth hanging open. The street noise faded. Sarah's hand trembled. The sign fell to the sidewalk. "Miss Houston," she whispered. Security Chief Marcus Thompson positioned himself between Whitney and the crowd. "Ma'am, step back." Sarah was backing away, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, voice breaking. "I shouldn't be singing your song. I'm nobody. I'm nothing." That's when Whitney opened the car door. "Miss Houston, no!" Marcus reached for her arm, but Whitney was already stepping onto the sidewalk. The crowd gasped. Whitney walked right up to Sarah and looked her in the eyes. "What's your name?" Whitney asked gently. Sarah couldn't speak, shaking so hard she could barely stand. "It's okay, baby. What's your name?" Sarah. Sarah Mitchell." "Sarah," Whitney repeated. "Where did you learn to sing?" Sarah's face crumpled. "I was in a church choir, back in Newark. Before everything—" "Newark?" Whitney's face lit up. "That's my home." "What church?" "New Hope Baptist," Sarah whispered. 20 years ago, before I lost my husband, before I lost everything." Whitney took Sarah's dirty hands in her own. The crowd went silent. "You didn't lose your voice," Whitney said. "I can hear it, Sarah. It's still there. You just lost your audience." Sarah started crying harder. "I used to sing like you did. I used to make people feel something. Now I'm just—" "You're still a singer," Whitney said firmly. "The homeless woman I just heard, she's a singer. And you know what? You were singing my song better than most professionals I've heard." Sarah shook her head violently. No, you're just being nice. I'm a mess. I'm nothing. I live in a shelter. I haven't had a real meal in 3 days. I can't even remember the last time someone looked at me like I was a human being." Whitney's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, look at me." Whitney's voice had that quality now, that thing that made people stop and listen when she spoke, not just when she sang. "This song, Greatest Love of All, do you know why I recorded it?" Sarah nodded weakly. "Because you sing it better than anyone." "No, baby. I recorded it because I needed to hear it. Because there were days when I was alone, when the pressure was crushing me, when I felt like I was losing myself in all the fame and expectations. On those days, I would listen to these words and remember, the greatest love of all is learning to love yourself." Whitney squeezed Sarah's hands tighter. "You're singing this song to the wrong person, Sarah. You're singing it to me, to strangers, to anybody who'll listen. But baby, you need to sing it to you." The crowd was dead silent now. People were filming, but nobody was talking. 50 people watching Whitney Houston holding hands with a homeless woman in the middle of Manhattan. Sarah was sobbing openly now. "I don't know how. I don't know how to love myself anymore. I don't even know who I am. That's when Whitney did something nobody expected. She started singing, right there on the street, no microphone, no stage, no rehearsal, just the voice, pure and clear and heartbreaking. Learning to love yourself, it is the greatest love of all. Sarah's mouth fell open. Whitney was singing directly to her, looking into her eyes, pouring every ounce of emotion into those words. Then Whitney held out her hand, inviting Sarah to join her. Come on, baby, sing with me. Sing it for you. Sarah hesitated, her voice caught in her throat. But Whitney kept singing, kept holding that invitation open. Slowly, shakily, Sarah started singing. I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadow. Their voices blended together, Whitney's powerful trained instrument and Sarah's broken, raw pain. It was the most unlikely duet anyone in that crowd had ever heard. People were crying now, filming, watching this impossible moment unfold. If I fail, if I succeed, at least I lived as I believe. Sarah's voice grew stronger. 20 years of shame and silence were pouring out of her. She wasn't singing for the crowd anymore. She was singing for herself, maybe for the first time in decades. When the song ended, Whitney pulled Sarah into a tight embrace. Sarah collapsed against her, sobbing, and Whitney just held her, right there on the dirty Manhattan sidewalk, while the crowd erupted in applause. Miss Houston, we really need to go, Marcus pleaded. There are too many people. Whitney finally looked at her security chief. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. What? Take Sarah to the car. The entire crowd gasped. Maria practically fell out of the limo. Marcus looked like he was going to have a heart attack. Miss Houston, I can't. Marcus, I wasn't asking. 10 minutes later, Sarah Mitchell was sitting in the back of Whitney Houston's limousine, still shaking, still crying, completely unable to process what was happening. Whitney handed her a bottle of water and a granola bar from the car's mini fridge. Eat, baby, slow. Sarah took tiny bites like she was afraid the food might disappear if she ate too fast. Maria was on the phone, frantically rescheduling Whitney's entire morning. Marcus was driving, glancing in the rearview mirror every 5 seconds. Where are we going? Sarah finally asked. Whitney smiled. Home. To Newark. To New Hope Baptist Church. Sarah's face went pale. No, I can't. They wouldn't want to see me. Not like this. I left that church 20 years ago when my life fell apart. They probably don't even remember me. They remember you, Whitney said softly. And more importantly, my mother remembers you. Your mother? Sissy Houston. She's been the music director there for 40 years. When they pulled up to New Hope Baptist Church, Sissy Houston was on the front steps, waiting. Whitney had called ahead. Mama, Whitney said, this is Sarah Mitchell. She was in your choir 20 years ago. Sissy studied Sarah's face carefully. Then her eyes widened. Sarah Jenkins? Little Sarah who sang soprano? Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face again. I'm Sarah Mitchell now. Was. I don't know who I am anymore. Sissy walked down the steps and took Sarah's face in her hands. You're Sarah. You're God's child. And you're home. Over the next 2 hours, Whitney and Sissy sat with Sarah in the church office. Sarah told her story. The husband who died in a car accident, the mental breakdown, the years of depression, the descent into homelessness. Why greatest love of all? Whitney asked. Why that song? Sarah smiled through her tears. Because when I sing it, I remember who I used to be, before the pain, before everything broke. For those 3 minutes, I'm Sarah Jenkins again, standing in this church, singing for God, feeling worthy. Whitney looked at her mother. Sissy nodded. Sarah, Whitney said, I want to make you an offer, not charity, a real offer. Sarah looked nervous. What? My mother needs another voice in the choir, a soprano, someone who knows pain, who knows struggle, who can sing from a real place. I can't. Yes, you can, Sissy interrupted. You just proved you can. My daughter doesn't bring random people to my church. She brought you here because she heard God in your voice. Sarah was shaking her head. But I'm homeless. I'm broken. I can't. The church has housing assistance, Sissy explained. We have a small apartment above the fellowship hall. It's not fancy, but it's safe, clean, warm. And in exchange, Whitney added, you sing, you show up, you remember who you are. Sarah looked between them, unable to speak. Sarah, Whitney said gently, you haven't lost everything. You still have your voice. You still have your faith. You still have yourself. You just forgot how to see it. Sarah started crying again, but this time they were different tears. That afternoon, Sarah Mitchell moved into the apartment above New Hope Baptist Church. Before Whitney left, she pulled Sarah aside. I'm going to check on you, Whitney said, not because I pity you, but because I believe in you. That voice of yours, it's a gift, and I don't let gifts go to waste. Sarah grabbed Whitney's hand. Why? Why did you do this? You don't even know me. Whitney smiled sadly. Because I know what it's like to feel lost, to feel like you're drowning even when everyone thinks you're on top of the world. You sang my song to survive. I'm going to make sure you can sing it to thrive. Over the next 2 years, Sarah Mitchell became a soloist in the New Hope Baptist Church choir. She gained weight, got healthier, started counseling. Slowly, painfully, she rebuilt her life. Whitney checked in regularly. Phone calls, surprise visits. She paid for Sarah's therapy sessions, though she never told Sarah that. In 1996, when Whitney married Bobby Brown, Sarah sang at the wedding, not as a homeless woman, but as a member of the choir, dressed in elegant robes. In 2012, when Whitney Houston died, the world mourned, but few people knew about the woman who sang Greatest Love of All at her funeral. Sarah Mitchell stood at the pulpit of New Hope Baptist Church, wearing a white dress, her hair now silver but clean and styled. She sang the same song Whitney had heard her sing 18 years earlier. But this time, her voice wasn't broken. It was whole. Learning to love yourself, it is the greatest love of all. The congregation wept. Kevin Costner wept. Clive Davis wept. After the funeral, a reporter approached Sarah. You sang beautifully. How did you know Whitney Houston? Sarah smiled through her tears. She taught me how to sing for myself instead of for others. She taught me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. She taught me that the voice wasn't just about vocal cords, it was about spirit. But when did she teach you this? The day she heard me singing her song on a street corner and decided I was worth stopping for. Today, Sarah Mitchell is 70 years old. She still lives in Newark. She still sings at New Hope Baptist Church every Sunday. She runs a ministry for homeless women, helping them find their voices. On her office wall hangs a framed photograph of Whitney Houston hugging her on that Manhattan street in 1994. Below the photo, Sarah has written, "The day the voice heard mine." Whitney Houston stopped her car that October morning because she heard something familiar in a stranger's broken voice. The sound of someone drowning in silence, singing to survive. What happened next wasn't charity, it was recognition. One voice saving another. Sometimes the greatest love of all is recognizing that someone else's pain deserves the same dignity as your own. Sometimes stopping your life to witness someone else's struggle is the most powerful thing a superstar can do. And sometimes a 3-minute song sung on a dirty sidewalk can change 2 lives forever. Whitney Houston gave Sarah Mitchell her voice back, but in doing so, she reminded herself why her own voice mattered. Not for the charts, not for the fame, not for the Grammys, but for moments like this, for people like Sarah, for the broken voices that just needed someone to hear them. That's the real legacy of The Voice, not the record sales, but the homeless woman who now helps other homeless women remember they're still worth hearing. The limousine was supposed to keep moving that day in 1994. Whitney Houston's security team had one rule: never stop. But The Voice stopped anyway, because some songs are too important not to hear, even when they're being sung by someone the world has taught us to ignore.